first contact with Joshua Pert.
Alright, welcome to First Contact Radio. How's everybody doing today? It is the 28th day of June 2017. We are now into the summertime. Lots of very interesting happenings in the news today, so let's get right to it. The first thing that is taking place is the Project Veritas drops that are occurring. So let's jump over and let's take a look at what's going on with that. All right, first off, yesterday, Project Veritas released part 1, in which John Bonifeld, CNN supervising producer, did admit that the whole narrative is false. Bunch of BS. So if you get a chance, go watch that video. So a lot of flack is going. CNN's in spin mode trying to correct that one. However, part 2 came out today, and part 2 features none other than Van Jones. Van Jones, the man who in his very racist fashion said that the election happened, it was a white lash. That Van Jones, the man who pretends that he is on the moral high ground when is exactly nothing more than a racist individual trying to prompt people into a racial divide further than what they are. Anyway, Van Jones was caught on a camera saying that it is a big nothing burger. Okay, big nothing burger. In other words, there's nothing to this Russian story. It's a lie. Okay, they're admitting it's a lie. This is the second person from their organization at CNN admitting that this is a lie. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves is, how long have these lies been taking place? Is this something new? Because during the course of the time President Trump has been in office, we have heard the term fake news quite a bit, haven't we? Fake news, fake news, fake news. But what does that mean? And is it something that is brand new to this administration? So that's the first question we need to ask ourselves. And the answer is no, this is not brand new. You see, fake news has been happening for a long time. But what actually is fake news? Well, it's very easy to figure out. You can determine what fake news is by the very first word of the sentence or the phrase, fake news. It means it's fake. It means the news that is being told is not real. It is fake. It is made up. Now, why would somebody make up the news? Well, people tell stories in order to manipulate others to do things that they want them to do. And so news organizations do the same thing. They manipulate stories because there is an agenda. The agenda is usually driven by the network themselves, who have a particular idea that the public is supposed to grab a hold of. And so the network will push people in that direction. Now, I know some of you say, well, Fox News is very credible. And the other agencies, MSN, CNN, MSNBC, CNN, those are all the corrupt fake news agencies. Well, let me let you in on a little secret here. They're all corrupt, including Fox News. You see, Fox News tries to pretend that they are not part of the mainstream media. Well, by definition, Fox News is a mainstream media news outlet. They are one of the main sources that people go for their news when they turn on their television. Okay, it is a main stream of information, but they try to fool you with the medium that is delivering this stream and pretend like people are stupid and are going to go along with it. But you see, here's a good way to think about the media, a very good way. The media are like sheepdog, and all of the sheepdog, let's say we have 3 of them in this case, MSNBC, CNN, and Fox. All 3 of these sheepdog look different. All of 3 of these sheepdog are different colors. They all have a different sounding bark. Maybe their size is a little different. And maybe the way in which they run and gather together the sheep is a little different. But I can assure you, at the end of the day, all three of those sheepdogs are leading the sheep to the same pen. They just have their different styles. That's how it is with the media. You see, if the media was really your friend, then it would be telling you the important information that is going on in the world. If you turn on Fox News today and you listen for the stories of Project Veritas, you're not going to hear it being discussed from hour to hour to hour. Why? Because Fox News is not your friend wanting to share all of that information, because ultimately the fake news is going to come back to them because they've been involved with a lot of fake news themselves. Okay? So you're not going to hear from them important stories. Case in point, I've been telling you about the stories about all of the pedophiles that are being arrested. There's now thousands of them, and there's hundreds to thousands of children that have been rescued. You would think that this was major news, very important news that everybody should know. However, are you hearing that on Fox News? Are they telling you all about the pedophiles that are arrested? No. Are you hearing it on CNN or MSNBC? No, of course not. They don't want you to know. Why? Because there are those at the different networks that are engaged in such behavior. So they're not going to go and tell you that there's these pedophiles being arrested, because then it means that something is getting closer to them, and they don't want you to know that. We have a horrible, horrible network of crime in this country, and as long as the media continues to manipulate, then we're going to continue to have these problems. So, I'm going to go back to a question I asked early on. How long has media manipulation been taking place? Right now, we have those who are supportive of President Trump, which are all into the media manipulation, supporting what he's about. But then there are those who are against him, thinking that the media manipulation has started just now, and it never occurred when their guy was in office. Well, let's take a trip down the historical lane and let's see exactly how long media manipulation has been occurring. So the first place we're going to go is we're going to jump over here, and we're going to look at the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations. Now, Council on Foreign Relations, for those who may be confused by the controversial surrounding the New World Order, a one-world government, and American concern over giving the UN more power, those unaware of the issues involved and those washing more background, I offer the following. Originally presented for an honors class, Dilemmas of War and Peace at New Mexico State University, the paper was ridiculed and characterized by Dr. Yosef Alapid, an acknowledged and locally quoted expert on terrorism and Middle Eastern affairs, as paranoid, possibly a symptom of mental illness. You may judge for yourself. Citing source data as the scientific method, but does not seem to apply to conspiracy theories, 1,000 sources may be quoted, yet none convince the skeptics, the realists. It seems to me that the symptoms of mental illness are on their side if they refuse to look at the evidence. There is none so blind as those who will not see, or perhaps something more sinister at work, such as a knowledge of truth that does not want you to know. To be paranoid means to believe in delusions of danger and persecution. If the danger is real and the evidence credible, then it cannot be delusional. To ignore the evidence and hope that it cannot be true is more evidence of mental illness. The issue involves more than a difference of philosophy or political viewpoint. Growing up in the midst of the Cold War, our generation were taught that those who attempted to abolish our national sovereignty and overthrow our constitutional government were committing acts of treason. Please judge for yourself if the group discussed is guilty of such. If one group is effectively in control of national governments and multi-international corporations, promotes world government through the control of media, foundation grants, and education, and controls and guides the issues of the day, then control most options available, the Council on Foreign Relations, otherwise known as the CFR, and the financial powers behind it have done all of these things and promote the New World Order as they have done for over 70 years. The Council on Foreign Relations is the promotional arm of the ruling elite in the United States of America. Most influential politicians, academics, and media personalities are members, and it uses its influence to infiltrate the New World Order into American life. Its experts write scholarly pieces to be used in decision-making. The academics expound on the wisdom of a united world, and the media members disseminate the message. To understand how the most influential people in America came to be members of an organization working purposefully for the overthrow of the Constitution, American sovereignty, we have to go back to at least the early 1900s, though the story begins much earlier, depending on your viewpoint and beliefs. That a ruling power elite does indeed control the U.S. government behind the scenes has been attested to by many Americans in positions to know. Felix Frankfurter, Justice of the Supreme Court 1939 through 1962, said, "The real rulers in Washington are invisible and exercise power from behind the scenes." In a letter to an associate dated November 21st, 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt wrote, "The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson." February 23rd, 1954, Senator William Jenner warned in a speech, "Outwardly we have a constitutional government. We have operating within our government and political system another body representing another form of government, a bureaucratic elite which believes our Constitution is outmoded." Baron A. Rothschild wrote, "Give me control over a nation's currency, and I care not who makes its laws." All that is needed to effectively control a government is to have control over the nation's money, a central bank with a monopoly over the supply of money and credit. This had been done in Western Europe with the creation of privately owned central banks, such as the Bank of England. Georgetown professor Dr. Carroll Quigley, Bill Clinton's mentor while at Georgetown, wrote about the goals of the investment bankers who control central banks. Nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole, controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements arranged and arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. The Bank of the United States from 1816 through 36, an attempt at an American central bank, was abolished by President Andrew Jackson, who believed that it threatened the nation. He wrote, "The bold effort the present bank has made to control the government, the distress it had wantonly produced, are but premonitions of the fate that awaits the American people should they be deluded into a perpetuation of this institution or the establishment of it like." Thomas Jefferson wrote, "The central bank is an institution of the most deadly hostility existing against the principles and form of our Constitution. If the American people allow private banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations will grow up around them, will deprive the people of all their property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered." Does that not describe the situation in America today? The U.S. managed to do without a central bank until early in this century, when Charles Lindbergh Sr., the money trust, caused the 1907 panic and thereby forced Congress to create a National Monetary Commission headed by Senator Nelson Aldrich, father-in-law of John D. Rockefeller Jr. The commission recommended creation of a central bank. Though unconstitutional, as only the Congress shall have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, according to Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, the Federal Reserve Act was passed December 1913, ostensibly to stabilize the economy and prevent further panics. But as Lindbergh warned Congress, this act, established as the most gigantic trust on earth, the invisible government by the money, power given to exist by the money trust investigation, will be legalized. The Great Depression and numerous recessions later, it is obvious the Federal Reserve produces inflation and federal debt whenever it desires, but not stability. Congressman Louis McFadden, House Committee on Banking and Currency, Chairman 1920 through 1931, stated, "When the Federal Reserve Act was passed, the people of the United States did not perceive that a world banking system was being set up here, a superstate controlled by international bankers and industrialists, acting together to enslave the world. Every effort has been made by the Fed to conceal its powers, but the truth is the Fed has usurped the government. Although called the Federal Reserve System is privately owned by member banks. It makes its policies and is not subject to oversight by Congress or the President as the overseer and supplier of reserves. The Fed gave banks access to public funds which enhanced their lending capability. Peter Kershaw in Economic Solutions listed 10 shareholders of the Federal Reserve Bank system as Rothschild, London and Berlin, Lazard Brothers, Paris, Israel, Sif, Italy, Kuhn Loeb Company, Germany, Warburg, Hamburg, and Amsterdam, Lehman Brothers, New York, Goldman Sachs, New York, Rockefeller, New York. That most of all of these families just happen to be Jewish, you may judge the significance of yourself. The balance of stock is owned by major corporate commercial member banks. According to D.V. Kidd, why bankrupt America? Well, the Federal Reserve pays the Bureau of Engraving and Printing approximately $23 for each 1,000 notes printed. 10,000 $100 notes, $100 million, would thus cost the Federal Reserve $230. They then secure a pledge of collateral equal to the face value from the U.S. government. The collateral is on our land and assets, collected by their agents, the IRS. By authorizing the Fed to regulate and create money and thus inflation, Congress gave private banks the power to create profits at will. As Lindbergh put it, the new law will create inflation whenever the trusts want inflation. They can unload the stocks on the people at high prices during the excitement and bring on a panic and buy them back at low prices. The day of reckoning is only a few years removed. That day came in 1921 with the stock market crash and the Great Depression. One of the most important powers given to the Fed was the right to buy and sell government securities and to provide loans to member banks so that they might also purchase them. This provided another built-in mechanism for profit of the banks. If the government debt was increased, all that was needed was a method to pay off the debt. This was accomplished through the passage of the income tax in 1913. A national income tax was declared unconstitutional in 1895 by the Supreme Court, so a constitutional amendment was proposed by Congress by none other than Senator Nelson Aldrich. As presented to the American people, it seemed reasonable enough. Income tax only on 1% of the income under $20,000, with the assurance that it would never increase. Well, since it was graduated, the tax would soak the rich, but the rich had other plans, already devising a method of protecting wealth as described by Gary Allen in his 1976 book, The Rockefeller File. By the time the 16th Amendment had been approved by the states, the Rockefeller Foundation was in full operation about the same time that Judge Kensaw Landis was ordering the breakup of the Standard Oil monopoly. John D. not only avoided taxes by creating 4 great tax-exempt foundations, he used them as repositories for his divested interests, made his assets non-taxable so they might be passed down through generations without estate or gift taxes. Each year, the Rockefellers can dump up to half of their incomes into their pet foundations and deduct the donations from their income tax. Exchanging ownership for control of wealth, foundations are also a handy means for promoting interests that benefit the wealthy. Millions of foundation dollars have been donated to causes such as promoting the use of drugs while degrading preventative medicine. Since many drugs are made from coal tar derivatives, both oil companies and drug manufacturing concerns are the main beneficiaries. With the means to loan enormous sums to the government, a method to repay the debt, and an escape from taxation for the wealthy, all that remained was an excuse to borrow money. By some happy coincidence in 1914, World War I began, and after American participation, national debt rose from $1 billion to $25 billion. Woodrow Wilson was elected president in 1913, beating incumbent William Howard Taft, who had vowed to veto legislation establishing a central bank. To divide the Republican vote and elect a relatively unknown Wilson, J.P. Morgan and Company poured money into the candidacy of Teddy Roosevelt, his Progressive Party. According to eyewitnesses, Wilson had brought a Democratic Party headquarters in 1912 by Bernard Baruch, a wealthy banker. He received an indoctrination in course from those he met, in return agreed, if elected, to support the projected Federal Reserve and the income tax. and to listen to advice in case of war in Europe and the composition of his cabinet. Wilson's top advisor during the 2 terms was the man named Colonel Edward M. House. House's biographer, Charles Seymour, called him the unseen guardian angel of the Federal Reserve Act, helping to guide it through Congress. Another biographer wrote that House believed that the Constitution, product of 18th century minds, was thoroughly outdated and that the country would be better off if the Constitution would be scrapped and rewritten. House wrote a book entitled Philip Drew Administrator. Published anonymously in 1912, the hero Philip Drew rules America and introduces radical changes such as graduated income tax, a central bank, and a League of Nations. World War I produced both a large national debt and huge profits for those who had backed Wilson. Barack was appointed head of the war industry boards, where he exercised dictatorial power over the national economy. He and the Rockefellers were reported to have earned over $200 million during the war. Wilson backer Cleveland Dodge sold munitions to the Allies, while J.P. Morgan loaned them hundreds of millions with the protection of U.S. entry into the war. While profit was certainly a motive, the war was also useful to justify the notion of the world government. William Hoare reveals in Architects of Conspiracy that during the 1950s, government investigators examining the records of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, a longtime promoter of globalism, found that several years before the outbreak of World War I, Carnegie trustees were planning to involve the U.S. in a general war to set the stage for world government. The main obstacle was that Americans did not want any involvement in European wars. Some kind of incident, such as explosion of the battleship Maine, which provoked the Spanish-American War, would have to be provided as provocation. This occurred when the Lusitania, carrying 128 Americans on board, was sunk by the German submarine, and anti-German sentiment was aroused. When war was declared, U.S. propaganda portrayed all Germans as Huns and fanged serpents, and all Americans opposing the war as traitors. What was not revealed at this time, however, was that the Lusitania was transporting war munitions to England, making it a legitimate target for the Germans. Even so, they had taken out large ads in New York papers asking Americans not to take passage on the ship. The evidence seems to point to a deliberate plan to have the ship sunk by the Germans. Colin Simpson, author of the Lusitania, wrote that Winston Churchill, head of the British Admiralty during the war, had ordered a report to predict the political impact if a passenger ship carrying Americans was sunk. German naval codes had been broken by the British, who knew approximately where all U-boats near the British Isles were located. According to Simpson, Commander Joseph Kenworthy of British Naval Intelligence stated the Lusitania was deliberately sent and considerably reduced speed to an area where a U-boat was known to be waiting, escorts withdrawn. Thus, even though Wilson had re-elected in 1916 with the slogan, "He kept us out of war," America soon found itself fighting a European war. Actually, Colonel House had already negotiated a secret agreement with England, committing the U.S. to the conflict. It seems the American public had little to say on the matter. With the end of the war, the Versailles treaties, which required severe reparations from Germany, the way was paved for the leader in Germany, such as Hitler. Wilson brought the peace conference his famous 14 points, with 14 being a proposal for a generation association of nations, which was the first step towards the goal of the one world government, the League of Nations. Wilson's official biographer, Ray Stanton Bernard, revealed that the League was not Wilson's idea. Not a single idea in the Covenant League was originally President. Colonel House was the author of the Covenant, and Wilson had merely rewritten it. The League of Nations was established, but it and the plan for world government eventually failed because the U.S. Senate would not ratify the Versailles Treaty. Pat Robertson in the New World Order states that Colonel House, along with other internationalists, realized that America would not join any scheme for world government without a change in public opinion. After a series of meetings, it was decided that an Institute of International Affairs with 2 branches in the United States and England would be formed. The British branch became known as the Royal Institute of International Affairs, with leadership provided by members of the Round Table. Begun in the late 1800s by Cecil Rhodes, the Round Table aimed to federate the English-speaking people of the world and to bring it under their rule. Council on Foreign Relations was incorporated as the American branch in New York in July 29, 1921. Founding members included Colonel House, such potentates of international banking as J.P. Morgan, John D. Rockefeller, Paul Warburg, Otto Kahn, and Jacob Schiff, the same clique that had engineered the establishment of the Federal Reserve System, according to Gary Allen in the October 1972 issue of American Opinion. The founding president of the CFR was John W. Davis, J.P. Morgan's personal attorney, while the vice president was Paul Cravath, also representing the Morgan interest. Professor Kara Quigley characterized the CFR as a front group for J.P. Morgan and the company in association with the very small American Round Table Group. Over the time, Morgan's influence was lost to the Rockefellers, who found that one world government fit their philosophy of business well. As John D. Rockefeller Sr. said, competition is sin and global monopoly fit their needs as they grew internationally. Anthony Sutton, a research fellow from the Hoover Institution for War, Revolution, and Peace at Stanford University, wrote that the philosophy, while monopoly control of industries was over the objective of J.P. Morgan and J.D. Rockefeller, by the late 19th century, the inner sanctums of Wall Street understood the most efficient way to gain an unchallenged monopoly was to go political and make society go to work for the monopolies under the name of public good and public interest. Frederick C. Howe revealed the strategy of using government in a 1906 book, Confessions of a Monopolist. These are the rules of big business. Get a monopoly, let society work for you, and remember that all the best of business is politics. Okay, so as you can see, and there's a whole lot more to this, but this kind of gives you a good head start. Okay, we had this one world government idea that was being pushed by the world bankers who were trying to establish the bank in America. They eventually did. And the Council on Foreign Relations, the branch in America, was set up as a branch in order to tell the story they wanted to be told to keep the American people in the dark. As you will continue to read on through here, you'll find out that the Council on Foreign Relations bought up 25 of the largest media outlets of that time for the purpose of controlling the information that came from them. And that is where the control system has been in place. Okay, so this is something that has been going on, Council on Foreign Relations, since 1921. I'm going to leave this link available for you so you can go and read all about this on your own. But I want to get on to some other things because there's much more here. So let's jump. This here is a piece called Operation Mockingbird. And Operation Mockingbird is important because this also continues with the manipulation of the media. Operation Mockingbird was allegedly a large-scale program of the United States Central Intelligence Agency that began in the early 1950s and attempted to manipulate news media for propaganda purposes. It funded student and cultural organizations and magazines as front organizations. According to Deborah Davis, Mockingbird recruited American journalists into propaganda network and oversaw the operations of front groups. CIA support of front groups was exposed after a 1967 Ramparts magazine article reported that the National Student Association received funding from the CIA. In the 70s, congressional investigations and reports also revealed agency connections with journalists and civic groups. None of these reports, however, mention an Operation Mockingbird controlling or supporting these activities. A Project Mockingbird is mentioned in the CIA Family Jewels report compiled in the mid-70s, according to the declassified version of the report released in 2007. Project Mockingbird involved wiretapping of 2 American journalists for several months in the early 60s. It's a little bit of a history of it. It says the claim that the CIA ran an Operation Mockingbird first appeared in the Catherine the Great, 1979 biography of Washington Post owner Katharine Graham, written and reporter Deborah Davis. According to Davis, Operation Mockingbird was established by Frank Wisner, director of the Office of Policy Coordination, a covert operations unit created by the U.S. National Security Council. Davis writes that Mockingbird was a response to the creation of a Communist Front organization, the International Organization of Journalists, which received money from Moscow and controlled reporters on every major newspaper in Europe, disseminating stories that promoted the communist cause. Wisner recruited Philip Graham from the New Washington Post to run the project within the industry. According to Davis, by the early 50s, Wisner owned respected members of the New York Times, Newsweek, CBS, and other communications vehicles. In 1951, Allen Dulles persuaded Cord Meyer to join the CIA. According to Deborah Davis, Meyer has become Mockingbird's principal operative. After 1953, the media network was overseen by CIA Director Allen Dulles, which by the time Operation Mockingbird had major influence over 25 newspapers and wire agencies. The usual method was placing reports developed from intelligence provided to the CIA by the CIA to cooperating or unwitting reporters. These reports would be repeated or cited by the preceding reporters, which in turn would then be cited throughout the media wire services. These networks were run by people with well-known liberal but pro-American big business anti-Soviet views such as William Pauly, CBS, Henry Luce, Time and Life magazine, Arthur Hayes Sutzenberger, New York Times, Alfred Friendly, managing editor of the Washington Post, Jerry O'Leary, Washington Star, Hale Hendricks, Miami News, Barry Bingham, Louisville Courier Journal, James Copley, Copley News Service, and James Harrison. So, as we can see here, and as you've just heard, there are some very familiar names, aren't there? You've got the Washington Post, you got the New York Times, and all of these places are connected in. You got Newsweek connected in with what group? The CIA. For what purpose? To manipulate the media. When was this? This is going back to the 70s, to the 60s, to the 50s. Okay? Now, prior to that, we've got years going back to the 20s where you've got the Council on Foreign Relations. So it's been nearly 100 years that there has been media control within America. Okay? From 1921 with the Council on Foreign Relations all the way through. So if you think that you're getting real media, I hate to burst your bubble, but you're not. Here's some more. This is some more on Operation Mockingbird because this is very important. In 1948, Frank Wisner was appointed director of the Office of Special Projects. Soon after, it was renamed the Office of Policy Coordination, OPC. This became the espionage and counterintelligence branch of the Central Intelligence Agency. Wisner was told to create an organization that concentrated on propaganda, economic warfare, preventative direct action, including sabotage, anti-sabotage, demolition and evacuation measures, subversion against hostile states, including assistance to underground resistant groups, and support of indigenous anti-communist elements in threatened countries of the free world. Later that year, Wisner established Mockingbird, a program to influence the domestic American media. Wisner recruited Philip Graham of the Washington Post to run the project within the industry. Graham himself recruited others who had worked for the military intelligence during the war. This included James Truitt, Russell Wiggins, Phil Guyland, John Hayes, and Ellen Barth. Others like Stuart Alsop, Joseph Alsop, and James Reston were recruited from within Georgetown's set. According to Deborah Davis, the author of Catherine the Great, by the early 50s, Wisner owned respected members of the New York Times, Newsweek, CBS, and other communications vehicles. Okay, and then it goes into the story of 1951 with Allen Dulles. So, 1948. 1948. Okay, so there's media control documented here with Operation Mockingbird going back to 1948. So if you think what is occurring right now is brand new and it only is because of Donald Trump, then let me tell you that you are incorrect. And just go back and check these links that I'm providing for confirmation about what I am saying. Don't take my word for it. Follow the links, read the information for yourself, confirm it with other links and other bits of information. This isn't hidden stories or information for you. It's just not nationally publicized by the media outlets. Why? Because they are involved with the process. Here's an interesting thing. Look up Anderson Cooper. See who Anderson Cooper did his internship. What you'll find is it is very interesting that Anderson Cooper's internship was with the CIA. Huh. And I'm telling you all about the CIA and the media. And yet Anderson Cooper, who's in the media, did an internship with the CIA, who's involved with manipulating the media. You see how it's all tying together? So it's not surprised that they're lying, because that is what they do. That is what they've been doing for a long, long, long time. Now, here's a video. I'm going to leave this for you here. The link's available. It's Operation Mockingbird and the CIA. Okay, the link's available so you could check that out today. It's an hour-long video. It gets really into a lot of important information all about what is going on with Operation Mockingbird. Okay, and some really good testimony. All right, so let me jump over. Let's look at a few other things here that I want you to see in this regard. I have a whole list of links that I put up in regards to media manipulation, so you can go through and see for yourself what is going on. Let me get to a couple more over here. Okay, this one here is called the Truth, War, Propaganda, CIA, and Media Manipulation. Goes on to say, never before has it been so important to have an independent, honest voices and sources of information. We are as a society inundated and overwhelmed with a flood of information from a wide variety of sources. But these sources of information by and large serve the powerful interests and individuals that own them. The main sources of information for both public and official consumption, including the mainstream media, alternative media, academic, and think tanks. The mainstream media is the most obvious in its inherent bias and manipulation. The mainstream media is owned directly by large multinational corporations and through their boards of directors are connected with a plethora of other major global corporations and elite interests. An example of these connections can be seen through the board of Time Warner. Time Warner owns Time Magazine, HBO, Warner Brothers, and CNN, among many others. The board of directors includes individuals presently or past affiliated with the Council on Foreign Relations, the IMF, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Warburg Pincus, Philip Morris, and AMR Corporation, among many others. Two of the most esteemed sources of news in the U.S. are the New York Times, referred to as the paper of record, and the Washington Post. The New York Times has on its board people who are past or presently affiliated with the Schering-Plough International Pharmaceuticals Company, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, Chevron Corporation, Wesco Financial Corporation, Kohlberg Company, and the Charles Schwab Corporation, eBay Incorporated, Xerox, IBM, Ford Motor Company, Eli Lilly, and among others, hardly a bastion of impartiality. The same couldn't be said for Washington Post, which has on its board Lee Bollinger, the president of Columbia University, and former chairman of Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and individuals associated with past or presently the Coca-Cola Company, New York University Conservation International, the Council on Foreign Relations, Xerox, Catalyst, Johnson & Johnson, Target Corporation, Rand Corporation, General Motors, and the Business Council, among others. It is also important to address the mainstream media is intertwined and covertly and secretly with governments. Carl Bernstein, one of the two Washington Post reporters who covered the Watergate scandal, revealed that there were over 400 American journalists who had secretly carried out assignments for the CIA. Interestingly, the use of journalists has been among the most productive means of intelligence gathering by the CIA. Among organizations which cooperated with the CIA were the American Broadcasting Company, the National Broadcasting Company, the Associated Press, the United Press International, Reuters, Hearst Newspapers, Scripps, Howard, Newsweek Magazine, the Mutual Broadcasting System, Miami Herald, and the Old Saturday Evening Post and the New York Herald Tribune. Okay, so some of the other to make note of is John Podesta is now at the Washington Post. Yes, John Podesta, who worked with the Obama administration. John Podesta, who is known to be highly involved with the pedophile circles that are going on. That John Podesta. The New York Post, who keeps putting out these hit pieces against Donald Trump, yeah, it's because John Podesta works there. It's all one big knot that is out there, and it's the same characters involved. The same characters involved. Here's another piece. This is CIA and the Media by Carl Bernstein, in which he gets into really discussing everything I've been saying about this. Okay? So, by now you should understand, and these are just some of the samples here. Here's 6 examples of media manipulation. I think these are important to check out. Let me get over here. Okay, 6 examples of media manipulation. Here we have Time Magazine sanitizes their covers for the American consumption. Okay, we could see examples of how they change their covers. CNN is the leader in fake war coverage. Okay, we've plenty of times you can go and Google in fake news, Syrian Danny. You'll find plenty of stories there that are fake. And of course, he's always in the midst of a lot of these fake stories. Who did I tell you he did an internship with? That's right, the CIA. Who's involved with media manipulation? The CIA. Do you think he's the only one? Probably not. All right, here's one. We can go all the way back. This was more fake news. Okay. So you go through on and on and on. Examples of scripted media. Scripted media. Now, here's part of the problem that we have is that media is so controlled now. There's really 6 corporations that are controlling everything. Okay. Here it says the illusion of choice. Here's the 6 companies: GE, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. And it may have even changed by now with the way that these companies are buying up each other and so on. And you can just follow and see who they control. But these organizations are in control of the media that we watch. That is why all the decisions are being made that seem so politically based, because those in charge of the media and this information are not those out for your well-being. So the question is, again, why are they manipulating the media? Very simple. We make decisions based on information that we receive. If we have good information, we can make good decisions. If we have bad information, the decisions we make will be bad decisions. So, if those in power want us to make bad decisions, and when I say bad decisions, bad for us, good for them, they use manipulation within the media to be able to get us to do things that are against the way that we would want to do them. How do they do that? By lying to us over and over and over again. When it got to this election time, there's been so much lying and misrepresentation in the media for years, people don't understand anymore what to do and how to move through this. Part of the problem is lying became legal. Here is a very important piece. This was part of the National Defense Authorization Act. It says the NDAA legalizes the use of propaganda on the U.S. public. The newest version of the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, includes an amendment that would legalize the use of propaganda on the American public, reports Michael Hastings of BuzzFeed. The amendment, proposed by Mark Thornberry of Texas and Adam Smith and passed in the House last Friday afternoon, would effectively nullify the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, which explicitly forbids information and psychological operations aimed at influencing U.S. public opinion. If you notice, this act, the Smith-Mundt Act, came out the same year when the CIA was involved. Remember that date, 1948? So there's been fighting back and forth on those who want information out and those that don't. Thornberry said that the current law ties the hands of American diplomatic officials, military, and others by inhibiting our ability to effectively communicate in a credible way, according to BuzzFeed. The vote came 2 days after a federal judge ruled that an indefinite detention provision in the annual defense bill was unconstitutional. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who released a highly critical report regarding the distortion of truth by senior military officials in Iraq and Afghanistan, dedicated a section of his report to information operations and states that after Desert Storm, the military wanted to transform IO into a core military competency on par with air-ground maritime special operations. Davis defines IO as integrated employment of electronic warfare, computer network operations, CNO, psychological operations, military deception, and operation security in concert with specified supporting and related capabilities to influence, disrupt, corrupt, or usurp adversarial human and automated decision-making while protecting our own. In other words, if you can't protect your mind, you got a problem, because there are those who are out there who are going to try to infiltrate your mind. Okay, so which way are you going to go? Are you going to protect your mind from the infiltration that's taking place? Or are you just going to be someone who is a victim of all that is happening? Now, some of the things that get really scary when you start looking at this manipulation is the way in which it moves from format to format. Here is a piece that came out, says how covert agents manipulate the internet to manipulate, deceive, and destroy reputations. One of the many pressing stories that remains to be told from the Snowden archive is how Western intelligence agencies are attempting to manipulate and control online discourse with extreme tactics of deception, reputation, destruction. It's time to tell a chunk of the story complete with relevant documents. Over the last several weeks, I have worked with NBC News to publish a series of articles about dirty trick tactics used by GCHQ's previously secret unit, JTRIG, Joint Threat Research Intelligence Group. These are based on 4 classified GCHQ documents presented to the NSA and 3 other partners in the English-speaking Five Eyes Alliance. Today, we are the interceptors and publishing another JTRIG document in full, entitled The Art of Deception Training for Online Covert Operations. By publishing these stories one by one, our NBC reporting highlighted some key discrete revelations: the monitoring of YouTube and Blogger, the targeting of Anonymous with very same DDoS attack they accuse activists of using, the use of honey traps luring people into compromising situations using sex and destructive viruses. But here, I want to focus and elaborate on the overarching point revealed by all of these documents, namely, that these agencies are attempting to control, infiltrate, manipulate, and warp online discourse, and in doing so, are compromising the integrity of the internet itself. Among the core self-identified purposes of JTRIG are 2 tactics. 1, to interject all sorts of false material into the internet in order to destroy the reputation of its targets, and 2, to use social sciences and other techniques to manipulate online discourse activism to generate outcomes it considered desirable. To see how extremist these programs are, just consider the tactics they boast of using to achieve these ends. False flag operations, which means posting material on the internet and falsely attributing it to somebody else. Fake victim blog posts pretending to be a victim of the individual whose reputation they want to destroy, and posting negative information on various forums. Here is a illustrative list of tactics from the latest GCHQ document we're publishing today. So, infiltration operation, ruse operation, set piece operation, false flag operation, false rescue operation, disruptive operation, and sting operation. So, There's much more to this, but this is where it gets dangerous because every day we are spending time online. And every day we need to be vigilant about the information that is out there. Because unfortunately, there are those online who are trying to destroy the reputations of others online. What we need to do is we need to be aware of all of these various tactics. And we need to not turn a blind eye to the reality that they exist. I've shown you through a series of links, and all of these links are available. firstcontactradio.com. They're going to be part of the video that goes out here at YouTube and wherever else it's going to go. I'll be tweeting this around. All of the links are here so you can check them and verify for yourself the history of media manipulation that has been going on. It didn't start with Donald Trump. It started long before Donald Trump arrived on the scene. Donald Trump is simply pointing out the manipulation that is there. Now, the reason people have a problem with Donald Trump, in my opinion, is because people have been lied to for such a long period of time by those who are wanting to put this New World Order in place, that when somebody has come along that is trying to take us in another direction, he is looked upon as the enemy by all those who have been convinced that the New World Order is the way to go. You see, it was George H.W. Bush Sr. who came up with the New World Order speech. He wasn't the first one, as you've seen. All of these other presidents in the past were involved with New World Order ideas, but he was one who actually put it out there. Hillary Clinton was supported by George H.W. Bush. Why? Because she was a piece of that puzzle that was going to put that all in place. Why didn't George Bush support Donald Trump? Because Donald Trump is not part of the old boys club. He's not part of that New World Order agenda. Anybody who has spent any degree of time studying the agenda of the New World Order would understand without a shadow of a doubt that Donald Trump represents something completely different. Completely different. And that is why they have such a problem with him. So I hope that you take time to go through these various different links that I gave you today. Let me show you again here. You can go to firstcontactradio.com and you've got all of the links available here. You start off, you've got the links of the CIA, or the CNN, Van Jones from today and the one yesterday, part of the America Pravda releases. Okay, this shows immediate manipulation going on. And then you have these other links, the GLOBALISTS, which really gets into naming a lot of these names involved. The Council on Foreign Relations, a couple of links on them. Operation Mockingbird, some videos. Then, of course, Truth, War, Propaganda, CIA and the Media Manipulation. A couple more on those. Examples of this media manipulation, opportunity to see the graphs and the grids to show the structure, the control structure in place. Story I just read to you about these deceptions. You might want to read in depth about that. Another great video, The Conspiracy Theory by Adam Green, a really good video that really gets into the points. And then if you want to see about the Smith-Monk Act, what they were trying to do, and the acts that were actually put in place so that they wouldn't try to use manipulation on us. So these are tactics that have been out there for a while. They're not brand new. Not brand new by any stretch of the imagination. So as you go through the course of today, you are going to hear a tremendous amount of spin from CNN. They may try to avoid this whole thing. Van Jones may not say anything about this. But remember, there were 3 people fired from CNN. And this was before the first video came out by Project Veritas. His video came out after that. They were fired. Then the next day he released. And now he's releasing the second one. CNN is a liar. They have no credibility. Okay? You've seen the lying. Read these links. get to understand the real manipulation that is occurring, how long it's been going on. And once you really understand that, I think you'll find that the decisions you make are a little different because you'll start looking at the media for what it is, which is nothing more than a propaganda piece. If you really want to get true news these days, you need to go to the alternative sources. I've got a tremendous amount in links available here for you to go check out here. Okay, you go to the left side page, top of the list, the Donald. You're going to get a lot of great info there. You got to dig through, find out great discussions over at the 4chan, Politically Incorrect section, InfoWars, Godlike Productions Forum, Jeff Rentz, get Drudge Report, Breitbart, WND, Above Top Secret, We Are Changed Coast to Coast, L. Todd Wood, Birther Report, Adam versus the Man, Pack Alert Press, Get Off the Thebes, the Pariah Newsletter, Media Equalizer. Okay, got a tremendous amount of links here. Scroll down, you can find out more about these different organizations. I mean, I've spent years in doing this show of just collecting these links, so there's a lot here, all with the purpose of informing you. There is not a reason why you should be uninformed about what's going on. The information's available. And if you are, then it's because you've chosen to remain uninformed. It's that simple. If you are still turning on CNN thinking that they are telling you news, despite the fact that there is so much information about how they fake the news, then you're not really understanding. Same thing as if you're turning on any of the other news networks. Okay? You need to go to alternative places to find the information because that's the only place where. Now, I know that if we really wrap our heads around this as a society and we really come to the conclusion that this information is accurate and is showing us the lies, then I know that we can do something about it. But oftentimes we don't act until we get to that point where we have to do something. Well, now is the time we have to do something. Okay? You can sit and you can watch, but I know things are taking place. I know that the bad guys are being called out. And so this is a great time to be alive because all of this manipulation that's been going on, we're going to watch. We're going to watch as the power structures behind it crumble. It's very strategic what's happening. Don't be afraid. Don't be alarmed by all the changes that are taking place. Don't get caught up in the lies that are being told out there because they're nothing more than lies. Just remember this. We live in a sea of energy. We're affected by all the other energies around us.
90.
The energies right now that are affecting us astrologically are the Cancerian energies, which are emotional energies. So there's a lot of emotional buttons that are being pushed out there. We just need not to get caught up in it. We need to make sure we're moving through life with our protections, our armor of protection on, so that we don't get affected by all of the negative things that hit us. They can just bounce off us then. And we move through life a bit more informed and a bit more ability to make better decisions because we are informed. If we do that, my friends, then we've got some really wonderful opportunities ahead of us. Right now, we're seeing the media come crashing down, and it's by their own hand, their own doing. They've lied, they've lied, they've lied. What's the story of the boy who cried wolf? Eventually, people stop believing the kid because after a while, you've lied so much that none of what you say has any credibility. That's where we're at. Let's keep on pushing the fake news narrative. Let's keep on pointing out the lies that are being told. Pass these stories around. Make sure people are informed about their true history. And that's it.
10 seconds.
Thanks for being here. I'll be back again with more news and information. Have yourselves an awesome day. I'll talk to you soon. I love you. Keep loving each other. Peace. I'm out of here.